Welcome to Creative Piecemeal. I'm Tammy Takaishi, a board-certified music therapist. Join me each week as a new guest from across the fine and creative arts spheres shares struggles, triumphs, laughs, words of wisdom, and more in authentic, thought-provoking, and inspiring interviews. Hello and welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast. Today I'm here with Ron Poulson. He's bassist with the band Pangaea. They recently released a new album at the end of May entitled Beowulf on the band's label HMG Records. I've had a chance to listen to it and I love it. If you're a fan of prog rock and melodic rock bands, they're definitely one to check out. And like I said, we have Ron here on the show and I'm excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
So the band has been around for a while, since 1989. And of course, you guys have, through the years released several albums and also took a bit of a break, but you're back and still rocking. So can you tell me a little bit about this new album and how that came together?
So I'll back up just a little bit. After, we did the bulk of the work, as you said earlier in our career. And then, a couple of the guys in the band kind of moved away. And then a couple of us, like myself and Steve, got married and had a family. And so Corey and I had been talking for years, and we're like, we really need to do this, And so a couple of years ago, we all finally said, look, we're going to do it. We met in Dallas and we just met to talk, at first. And then we took some pictures with each other. And then we all agreed after that first meeting that we should probably get down to Houston. So Steve and I actually live in Tulsa and the other guys all live in Houston or Beaumont area. So Corey flew Steve and I down there. And we just started rehearsing. And the funny thing is, when we started rehearsing again, it was kind of like we were never apart. And like those 20 years were just like last week, and it felt like it did 20 years ago. It felt good. It felt natural. And so we just started rehearsing. And the ideas were to just rehearse all the old music, to go out and try to play some shows again. And what that turned into was, hey, I've got a song. Hey, I've got a song. Hey, I've got some songs. Maybe we should call Robert. Maybe we should go do another album. So that's kind of where it went to. It went from just wanting to be together again as friends, to let's practice, let's play live, to we should do a new album. And so that's how we got there from here.
That's wonderful. Did you personally contribute any original compositions to this particular album?
This is going to be more of Corey. It's going to be Steve and Andy on these, pretty much, who wrote our drummer and our lead singer and our keyboard player, who wrote these songs.
So obviously you play bass, but have you ever dabbled with any other musical instruments in your life?
Yeah, I started on trumpet, when I was younger, like in middle school, because my father played trumpet. That's kind of how I got into it a little bit. My uncle is a bass player. And in high school, my grandparents actually brought me one of his old basses. And about that time, Corey and I were actually playing on a soccer team together before that. That's how we actually met. We were soccer teammates. And then in high school, and Corey got a guitar, I got a bass. Corey's like, well, hey, I have a band. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm your bass player. So that's we've just been together ever since, and I went through a little bit of piano, a little bit of guitar, but my main instrument has always been, and, is the bass. That's kind of where I landed, I guess,
Mm-hmm. And that's so great that you guys just met organically, like that doesn't always happen,
We've known each other for a long time. One of our, I don't know if we have 6 guys in the band. The newest guy, his name is Scott. He actually lives in Beaumont, down there in Texas by Houston. And we've had different iterations of the band where some of us have and haven't been in the band at different times. And Scott had come in. We realized after we recorded this last album that there was no way that the 5 of us were going to be able to go out and pull this off with just 5 of us because Corey plays so many keyboard parts and we put down so many guitar parts that there's no way for 5 guys to cover it all. And so the obvious choice was to ask Scott to come back into the band. And Scott had mentioned something that, you guys, we kind of like know what each other is going to say and finish each other's thoughts and sentences or stuff like that. And I guess Andy looked at him and he goes, man, I met Ron when I was in junior high, so we've all kind of known each other for, early school days kind of.
Yeah. And of course you've had, a long career, 30 plus years being in a band. Is that something that you envisioned when you were younger? Did you realize that it would take you to all these different places?
I kind of hoped it would. I thought, I had that dream in high school that it was going to be my career. That's what I would be doing. I didn't necessarily think or want to be like the big star, right? Like Bono or something like that, or somebody like that. I would be fine like being in a band like that and not being famous.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be able to support, my family, being a musician and playing music, that's the goal. And Corey and I have had that discussion more than once. I don't need everyone in the world to know who I am where I can't walk out of my front door. I want to be able to tour the country and hopefully, hear one day the world and see places that I've never seen and go to places I've never been and be able to, to support my family just doing that and not having to worry about getting up and doing a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, and just, we talked about this the other day. I don't know if you know, but this past Thursday, we played the Oklahoma Music Hall of Fame in Muskogee, Oklahoma. And we were all at this little Amish restaurant eating lunch, and we're just kind of looking around at each other and goes, man, this would be it. This would be great if we could just do this every day to get to see places like this all over the country that some people will never get to see in their life. That's kind of the end goal for me. And I think for some of the other guys in the band as well, is just to be able to travel around, people hear our music and, hopefully they like it and they come and we get to see places that we would not normally get to see. That's kind of the goal for me.
What is something that has been challenging about being in the band that is either something that you got through or maybe is still challenging for you today?
Today is a lot different than in the past, because in the past, so everybody used to live here in Tulsa. And, I was like, I could get in my car and I would drive to Corey and Andy's mom's house, and that's where they lived. And we would practice whenever we wanted, like all day, like Sunday all day. If we wanted to take a song and just work on it, that's what we did. And now with all of us living obviously apart from each other, it's difficult because, we can practice on our own individually, but there's something about when we all get in the room and we work together and we take a song and we dissect it and put it back together with all the guys there in the room. It's different than when you're just practicing on your own. And another part to that is, we all have day jobs still. So that kind of wears on us, and some of us have family. So I'm actually married and I have 3 daughters myself. So, I've got daughters, 2 that live with me and 1 that's in college right now. So, there's a lot for me to try to orchestrate between work and family and the band. Where in the past, it wasn't like that. It was just like go to work and I would just do the band, and I wasn't married and didn't have kids. So I could, if I wanted to go over there every night of the week and practice, we did, So, and we spent a lot of time together. When we weren't practicing on like Friday and Saturday nights, Corey and Andy and I were hanging out together and doing things and going and doing stuff together, just like friends would do, So have changed, when you grow up and you get married and you have kids and you have real life adult responsibilities like a job and everything like that. You kind of grow up pretty quick, and that's kind of what happened over those 20 years. But we're in a pretty fortunate position where we've been able to make it work, where Steve and I will fly down there and we'll go down on like a Friday night and come back really late on a Sunday night. So we have all weekend to like work through everything. And we played a show in Beaumont, Texas at an art studio a couple months back, and we had a certain set list for that. So obviously we concentrated on those songs. It was about an hour long. And then we knew that the Hall of Fame show was coming up in Muskogee last week, and we had 2 hours. So we had to learn like an extra hour of music, and we knew that was coming up. So obviously when we practiced, we focused on those songs. And before we went and did the album at Roberts last year, we kind of did the same thing. We would fly down there, and Corey, we would take a song and we'd go through it. Andy has his own like little mini studio set up, so we would do all the basic tracks and the rough tracks. We'd send them out to Robert so he could, hey, tweak this, do this, change that, all that kind of stuff. And so before we went out there to do the recording, because Robert only had like a couple weeks in his schedule that we had to fit in that window so we could make sure we did it with him, so that before we went out there, we all kind of knew what was going to happen. Before we got out to Robert's, we'd go out there and we knew what was going on, but Robert would be like, hey, we're going to change the key of this song, or I don't like this verse. We're going to take, he changed a lot. And on this album, he didn't really change that much. He might have tweaked a couple of things, but I think what we learned from doing the first 3 albums with Robert was he taught us how to be better songwriters and how to structure the songs better, and just the whole creative process to come to him with a better finished product. So he didn't really have to do all that this time. And that was a good part of all the proactive work we did before this album, before we went out there this time. I think we've all matured as musicians, obviously as adults, and had a lot of growing up to do, I guess they would say, in the last 20 years, all of us did. So I don't know if that answers the question, but.
Yeah. You mentioned about the creative process. What is something that you really love about it?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
If you've been feeling burned out, stressed, overwhelmed, or exhausted, the resources and courses at the Self-Care Institute are here to support you. The Self-Care Institute was founded by Dr. Ami Kunimura and provides support for individuals and organizations with burnout prevention, burnout recovery, and stress management. I've personally taken a few of these courses and found them to be super helpful, both professionally and personally. The care you give yourself matters just as much as the care you give to others. But if self-care is difficult for you, you're not alone. And the Self-Care Institute is here to support your well-being, resilience, and sense of fulfillment at work and at home. For more information, visit selfcareinstitute.com or go to the show notes and click on the link.
Oh, here's what I'll tell you is I can go to Corey with an idea, or any one of us. We could just be sitting around talking, and somebody could say something like, hey, maybe we should da-da-da with this, that, and the other. Corey will get real quiet. There's a song called In My Dreams. And then a few minutes later, he's like, hey, what if we do this with that idea you just had? Like, here's a good example. On one of, and I had this piano part, and I played it for him one day, and he's like, Corey has all these notebooks with all these lyrics in it and all these song ideas. And he can take what you gave him, just a little bit of something, and he's like, I've got lyrics. And he'll go and he'll take that part that I gave him on piano. And he came back the next day and sat down and he started playing In My Dreams. And that's kind of what we do off each other. This last time, and it was like this little bass riff. And, he's like, oh, I'm going to take that and put that in a song. And that's kind of what all of us do at a point or something like that. Or Corey will write a song and come in with like a basic structure of what he envisions with the lyrics and what he envisions with, like how he wants the bass line to be. But if during practice you do something a little else, he's like, yeah, I like that. Keep doing that. Or if Steve sings something a little different or maybe plays something a little different or has an idea himself about what kind of sound he wants on a keyboard or something like that. We do that, like I said, when we're in that room with each other, each one of us do that. It's like, hey, I think you ought to try this, try that. Even before this last show, he was playing something on the Hammond on one of our songs. And it was like, that's not the right sound. And we all kind of stopped and looked at him at the same time. And he went through 3 or 4 different sounds. And it was like, oh yeah, that's it right there. That's the one. He's like, oh yeah, okay. So it's kind of funny, but we do that. And we're not like harping on each other or being mean or anything like that. We really are like brothers and we're helping each other out to get to that end goal of what we all hear to make it better, in the end, so that it's a better product for everyone to listen to. I know.
Nice. It sounds like you really value the collaboration and the teamwork and just sort of being able to build off each other's ideas.
That's very true. Yes.
And obviously the creative process can, evolve over the years and doesn't always look pretty. Is there a part that you really get frustrated with?
I don't really think there is. I would say in the beginning, it was Corey's baby, and most everything was his. And I think he's really matured too, in the fact that he's opened up the door to let everybody else, in the beginning, he was kind of like, this is the part, this is how you're playing it kind of thing. And, and now these days, it's more like, here's an idea, here's kind of like how we're going to do it. And then if somebody else plays something a little different, or maybe comes up with something better or not as much, I'll give you an example. He has some very specific things written out when we went in the studio this time, very hard lines and stuff like that I didn't play everything. And then if you listen to the recording, it's not there's more notes, right? More bass notes. It's more detailed. I left a lot of that stuff out when we did the recording. And then when we started practicing again, I was looking at the charts and I was playing off the charts, and we were all kind of like, hey, you didn't play that much on the record. There's a lot more space in there. It's not as busy bass-wise. So we went back and we dialed it down some. He's allowed you to, being what I would call the main songwriter, the principal songwriter, he's allowed you to make the changes that you feel would better benefit and or help the song. And, I think in the long run, it's kind of brought us all, it makes you feel a little bit more like you're part of the band, or you're involved, or you're having more of a say in the creative and or the writing process. I mean, it's still today, it's his baby and it's his idea, but it's got your ideas in it, if that makes sense. And you've contributed something to it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's great. What is something that you've learned throughout the years, whether it's being in a band or just being a musician in general, that you'd want to pass along to listeners?
It's not as easy as you might think, or everybody would be doing it. You hear that all the time. Practice, practice, practice. I don't, Corey he's a professor. He teaches music at a college. And out of the 6 guys in the band, I probably struggle the hardest. I don't learn as well as everybody else does. So for me, I could sit there and look at the music on paper all day and I'm not going to get it. For me, I have to be in a band setting in the room, and we have to go through the songs live for it to like sink in for me to grasp it. It doesn't come overnight. And the people who get success, I guess it's kind of like, it might relate to like pro sports where, you have X amount of people that actually really make it. And then there's a billion people that are trying, and there's a billion people that could take your place tomorrow, and it's kind of that we go over this all the time, when we're together and we're talking. It's like, man, if we would have 20 years ago, if we would have all gone on a plane and went to Europe or something like that, we might be the biggest prog band in the world right now, or you just don't ever know. That's the thing. You don't know. We could have fallen flat on our face. We always say if we could have got to Asia, if we could have got to Europe, we'd be gigantic. Everybody would know who we were, but we didn't. We got to that point where we got pretty high, like you said in the very beginning, we achieved quite a bit. I mean, we got to a pretty good point. And like I said, things happened. They moved. I got married. Steve got married. We had kids, and that wasn't as important, I guess, on our to-do list as it was when we were in high school and we thought we were going to make it in the band, and be musicians for the rest of our life. So that's the thing. Don't ever, I guess, always have a backup plan. I mean, being in a band, it would be great. And like I told you before, just being on a tour and being able to support your family and do what you love is our end goal. But, in reality, you have to be really smart about it. And you have to realize that, family is very, very important, and to some of us having an actual job is very important. You have to be grounded. Can't take it for granted, because for every one person that makes it, a billion don't. So.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's such a great point. And, that really speaks to just balancing what somebody needs to do in their life at certain periods of time. Like you said, at one point in time, family and just holding down a regular, quote unquote, regular job was more important. Not that the music wasn't important or the band wasn't important, but it just sort of took a back seat to a few other things that needed more attention at the time. And I'm so glad that you guys were able to still be involved in music and come back regardless of the fact that you took a break.
It was bad, for me for years there. I didn't even have an instrument in the house. I didn't have a bass. And I forgot about it almost completely. I refereed soccer. Like I told you, Corey and I were involved in soccer, and I was able to pursue a career as a referee in soccer at very, very high levels, like at the professional level. And so, music really, really took a back seat to all that. And I don't know, one day, I think I might have texted Corey, probably could have been 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And then we started texting each other pretty regularly over those 5 years. And then right before we met, we were both kind of like, man, we have got to do this because this is it. It's what you're meant to do. One of our guitar players said the other day, somebody said, like, what are you doing this for? And it's a really simple answer. It's what I'm supposed to be doing, and everybody in the band feels that way. We all feel that whatever else you're doing, family, work, friends, all that other stuff, the one thing that we're meant to be doing and we feel like we're put here to do is to be in Pangaea and to make sure that everybody that we can gets to hear it,
Mm-hmm.
That's the idea, I guess, or the goal.
Yeah. And you've got that new album out. Do you have any favorite memories of recording? Are you able to say if you have a favorite song from that album so far?
I'd probably say Necromancer. For me, the weirder, proggier stuff that we can get into is probably the stuff for me, not the more mainstream type of stuff that we do. Even though we call it mainstream, it's not really for us. It's still got a lot of twists and turns in the song, even though it might be considered more straightforward. But the stuff we do, like from our older albums, like The Fall of Rome and Ship and those kind of things are to me, another one that speaks on the new record is, I know you listen to it, is Wasapi. That's actually a song that our drummer Andy wrote. And that's got a lot of, I'll tell you something about that song. It was in one of those sessions where it was just where I told you that we were doing the pre-tracks, the basic tracks to send to Robert. And we were down, it was just me, Corey, and Andy. And Andy and I were sitting behind the control and we were listening to it. And Corey was like, what exactly is this song? What are you trying to say? What does it mean? And Andy explained it to him. And that's how Corey got the whole idea for the whole lyric is from Beowulf. You might know that already. And in all the Native American you hear in it is something that Andy put together from Comanche. So it's and it just happened like that. Right after, it's one of those moments I tell you about where you tell Corey something and he gets real quiet, and that's what he did. Andy said something about it, and Corey turned around and he goes, "You're talking about Beowulf." So he immediately pulled the Beowulf up and he translated it. And then when you take Steve's voice, so Steve's like a classically trained opera singer and he does a lot of stage performing and stuff. So when you take that voice of his and put that text to it, and then the whole thing of Wasabi comes out like that. And when you listen to it, because when you're in the studio, I get the drums and I get my bass, or you'll get like some pieces of it put together, but you don't get the whole song until it's done, until Robert was. So I was, sorry, I have dogs. So I was back home and we went down to Houston and they played the whole album for us, and sitting there listening to that song for the very first time, man, I'm gonna tell you, that was it was pretty powerful that all that came together, to make that. When we flew out there, because we knew we only had a certain window, we had practiced so much. So I did all the songs. Andy took 2 days. I took 2 days. And we got pretty fortunate that it only took the drums and the bass 4 days to get through everything, because it took so that everybody else could have all that extra time to do all the other things we needed to do, like extra vocals and guitars and keyboards and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I'd say Necromancer and Wasapi probably stick out to me as the two highlights, because they're more in the prog field of what I kind of like to listen to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was listening to the album, Wasapi really stood out because it was different. Like it was just immediately more unique and a little bit like you said, more powerful. Not that the other songs aren't, but that just sort of like was like, oh, this is not your typical song.
Right. And I can tell you that I have one of my daughters is at college, and all of her friends, that's the one. They're like, are you playing that? We don't actually play it live yet because we've only had a couple shows, like I mentioned, but it's one of the ones on the list that we're all like, we need to figure out how we're going to do that, because a lot of it is, there's a lot of drum parts. So there's going to be a couple of us that don't play our instruments, and we play drums. So it's going to be that'll be a neat one visually too.
Yeah. And obviously, as a musician, you have influences through your life. Are there any bands or music albums that have really stuck with you over the years?
You probably wouldn't believe me if I told you. So it's funny because I'm in a prog band, but the reason I started playing and the reason I got a guitar was because of Kiss and because of Ace Frehley. That's why I picked up a guitar, and I bought a $200 Les Paul copy because when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be Ace Frehley and Kiss. And so you can see how that changed. But when I met Corey, he was like, "Have you ever heard of this band Asia?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know who that is," And so I would say right now, one of my biggest influences is Pink Floyd. I love Porcupine Tree, if you've ever heard of them, and Steven Wilson, and I love the Pineapple Thief. So those bands to me right now are very, very influential. Next weekend, there's a band going to be here called Brit Floyd, they're like the biggest tribute band for Pink Floyd in the world, and this will be my third year in a row of seeing them. So it's stuff like UK, King Crimson,
mm-hmm.
Pink Floyd, all those ELP, Asia, Yes, Rush. It's that kind of music that I spend most of my time listening to. But when I was in high school, I want to tell you what, Dream Theater, that's another big influence on me. But when I was in high school, I had long hair down to my butt. I was a 80s heavy metal kid. And if it wasn't Kiss or Dokken or Winger, that's the stuff I was into, all the 80s heavy metal bands. And I went to all the concerts, LA Guns, Dangerous Toys. Mention a Skid Row. Any of those bands like that. So my taste, obviously, as I've gotten older, I don't know if you want to say mellowed out, but they've definitely changed to a more mature taste in those kind of bands.
Excellent. Yeah. And those are all such great bands. Plus the 80s had some just amazing music just across the board, across the genres,
It's coming back.
It is. Yeah. Now all the teenagers nowadays are like listening to 80s music, and it's like, wait a minute.
Well, I think to that point, we actually had this talk the other day, because if you know what happened, and I have a really good drummer friend of mine who was playing heavy metal, and he started playing country. And I was like, what happened to the 80s heavy metal guys? Most of those guys started playing country. And then, country became really big. And now country's not as big as it once was. And I think what we have found out from our last two shows, mostly the crowd that we played at the art studio in Beaumont, Texas, they were like college age kids, late high school, early college age kids. And I think that we went over very, very well. And we also went over very well at the Hall of Fame last week in Muskogee in Oklahoma. And I think the reason is I think people, they look for something that maybe, right now music is very sterile. Like it's the same kind of thing. And you get the cookie cutter deal. We've got this one girl who sings, and her album's really big, so we need 1,000 of them. So there's a hole in the market with that. They did the same thing with heavy metal in the 80s. and they flooded the market with it. And we all know Nirvana killed that. And then they did the same thing with country. You get like one or two guys that are really big and popular, and then there's 1,000 of them. Well, and then people are like, okay, we've got enough of that. And hopefully we're hitting that wave, with the response that we saw, where people are like, wow, you guys are actually playing your instruments, and you're actually singing. You're not taped anything. If you make a mistake, it's real. If somebody hits a bad note or sings a bad note, and your music is some of it's kind of straightforward with a little twist, kind of like an Asia thing, and some of it's just crazy weird out there, like Yes, or something like that. You can be mellow like Pink Floyd, and so hopefully this time around we've kind of hit where we need to hit, and we've seen a lot of good feedback from a lot of the people that we've had people that, man, I've been waiting 20 years for this album. And, we thought people had wrote us off, and come to find out there's people out there that were fans that were like, man, you guys got a new album. And they email us, and they're more excited than we are. So it's actually great. It's a good feeling.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So one final question, how would you like to be remembered?
Yeah. Well, that's tough, isn't it?
Right?
Musically, as probably the biggest thing for me, I just want to be remembered probably as a good dad to my kids, husband, brother, son. But on a music level, good bandmate, good friend. And musically, that we just put out a good product, that somebody is going to want to sit down to in 20 years from now, like that Pink Floyd album, and pull it out and listen to it again. Like that guy, that I told you about in Florida that's been waiting for us for 20 years,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I'm just a mediocre bass player, but I have some good friends in the band that really help me out. So I'm pretty fortunate in that. But probably most importantly is to be remembered, good person, good dad, good husband. And then at the end of the day with music, that we gave it our all. And, we hope that we put a product out there that will stand 20 years, and that somebody will want to pull out that CD in 20 years. And to that point, we were listening to a song the other night. We have all these albums, and there's no way we can play every song. And then somebody will play one of the songs, and we'll be like, why don't we play that one live? And Corey's like, because then you'll have to drop this song. And so, that's the thing. We have so many songs that each one of us feel would be great in that live setting. But if you have an hour or 2 hours, and we have, 4 or 5 albums, there's no way you're going to be able to play all that. You can't put it in there. So that's the thing. We have all these. We would love to be able to play every song, but we'd be up there half the day. So
yeah,
just being remembered for our body of work, and that it was good. If that makes sense. I know that's probably not the greatest answer, but that's at the end of the day, you put out a quality piece of work, or something that somebody finds something in, or they find meaning in, or that they can take something away from positive for themselves, probably. That's probably a better way of phrasing that.
And, as long as you feel proud and you feel like you've put your best in, that's really all that matters,
We do. After this time I was out there and I knocked out that whole album in 2 days, we all just looked around at each other and we're like, wow. And I give a lot of that credit to Corey and Andy for all the pre-production that we did down there before we even flew out there. We had plenty of rehearsals where it was just Corey and Andy and I in the room going, hey, this is how this goes, or just singing it to me, vocally, so I could hear it. And we kept going over it and recording it and kept doing it till we got it to where we wanted, and so, yeah, that we do. I probably feel better about this album than probably the others, for sure. It was more cohesive, if that makes sense, or more, I'm not sure if that's the word, but more thought out, probably more well put together.
Yeah, it definitely seems like, you all had a chance to evolve and come together and bring those life experiences, and it had influences on the album, even if it was just on a subconscious level,
I definitely will agree. Yeah, that's a very true statement. Yeah, I do think we did. Each one of us put our own little spin on it, our little piece in there,
Excellent. Well, Ron, thank you so much for joining the podcast. Listeners, please check the show notes to learn more about the band Pangaea, and also links in order to purchase their album Beowulf and anything else you might be interested in. Ron, thanks again. And listeners, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Creative Piecemeal. We hope today's episode left you feeling inspired. This podcast is independently created and produced by the host, Tammy Takaishi. More details about today's guest can be found in the show notes, along with links to the podcast's socials, merch store, and ways to support arts organizations AHA Broadway and New Normal Rep, both near and dear to Tammy's heart. Don't forget to visit creativepiecemeal.com, the official podcast website, where you can leave fan mail, write a review, explore Tammy's blog, and discover the growing collection of episodes. Special thanks to our audio engineer, Alex Repetti. Additional narration by Dante Jace. Let's keep celebrating creativity in all its forms.